I always start with the music when it comes to me, and if it keeps flowing, to me, it's worth working on. And if I just get stuck, then it obviously feels like it's not going to go somewhere. And so whenever I have, a melody of some kind, that I just don't, without thinking, go like, what does this feel like? And then what's some words that can just build a line, one line, and then I'll usually go from there and build it off.
Hey there, welcome back. We are 8 episodes deep into season 5 of The Record Process. And this week, we caught up with actor, comedian, and podcast producer, Mr. Matt Gourley. Some of you comedy podcast fans out there might recognize Matt's name from the infamous Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast. But in this interview, Matt sheds light on his musical endeavors with his LA-based indie rock group, Townland. As we explore the band's creative process behind their 2022 record, Honey on the Hi-Fi, Gourley dives into his pattern for turning his hobbies and passions into careers. He also talks about the inception of the record and the joy that he finds through embedding lyrical and musical Easter eggs into all of his songwriting work. We talk about how former generations of his family inspire some of the lyrical components on this record. We also have a lot of fun discussing the creative lengths that he'll go to pair these songs with unique and compelling visual elements to help tell the story. So stay tuned. All of that and much more is straight ahead. So many of the albums that we'll be highlighting this season on The Record Process share one very important theme. And that's the idea of technology helping musicians and creators overcome the collaborative restrictions that once came along with geographic location. Thanks to companies like Audio Movers, real-time remote audio production and the tools that make it possible are more powerful than ever. Their groundbreaking Listen To plugin allows you to stream, record, and collaborate on high-quality audio in real time and is used on a daily basis by world-class audio engineers and professionals at places like Capitol and Abbey Road Studios. Their new Pro plan allows you to stream up to 150 users simultaneously, includes custom branding, and even allows you to stream MIDI data in real time. So head on over to audiomovers.com and enter the code RECORDPRO to get 1 month free off your Pro membership today. So as you already know, we do a lot of talking about the creation of original music here on The Record Process. I mean, that's kind of our thing. But it can also be fun to put your own spin on an old classic and tell the world something else about yourself through something like a cover song. Cover songs can be a really interesting way to connect with your existing fan base, or even a way to put yourself in front of new audiences through shared musical tastes. And our friends at DistroKid have made it super simple to upload a cover of your favorite song while allowing them to handle all of the back-end licensing work that can really be a headache for independent artists. DistroKid will notify the composer and publisher of its release, they will pay the necessary licensing fee, and they will take care of all the other legal red tape involved with releasing a cover song on a streaming platform, allowing you to fully focus on enjoying the process of putting your unique artistic spin on that recording. If you're already a DistroKid member, you can access this as you're uploading your track for $12 a year per song. Or if you're not yet a member and you'd like to sign up for DistroKid, you can use the link in our show notes to get 30% off of your first year's membership. Matt Gourley, welcome to The Record Process. This is really exciting for us, my friend. This is going to be a great one. We're here to talk to you about, well, specifically your band called Townland and the record Honey on the Hi-Fi. But there's so much that I want to get into with you personally as well as a musician. Let's start simple and small. How are you doing, Matt? And how is life?
Life is good. Life is hectic. I have a toddler, and by toddler, I mean the extreme version of a toddler. She's just like a Roomba vacuum that's bouncing off the walls and using her voice in every way possible, which is wonderful, but it keeps us on our toes. So I may not be able to stay awake past noon anymore, but I'm good.
Well, you're past noon today. Congratulations.
Well, you made
Wait,
it past
where are you
You made
guys?
it past our noon.
Oh,
I'll say that.
Yeah, our noon. Yeah.
It's 10:37 here, so it's getting close to my bedtime. And I should say AM.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we're on the East Coast. Well, Tom and I'm in Atlanta. Tom is outside Philadelphia. So you were on the West Coast then, I imagine. Well, you're doing great. Well, let us know if you need to tap out at any time.
I'm in it. Because this is actually a break from my toddler. So are you kidding? This is a vacation.
Right. You get to just kind of sequester yourself, lock the door, and just be like, Dad needs about an hour. Okay.
Dad needs another podcast.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Totally. Honestly. A break from the rest of your podcast. Well, that's honestly a perfect start for many that may not be familiar. The day job, as they might call it. You're a man of many talents, of course, but some may recognize the name and perhaps your voice from a pretty notable podcast. Isn't that right, Matt?
Yeah, it's the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast, where his assistant Sona and I kind of serve as embattled sidekicks and, whipping posts. But we also like to give as good as we get, I think.
That's right. I think you do a phenomenal job. Somebody's got to keep Conan in line or serve up some nice fodder here and there for him to kind of grind up and spit back out into a microphone. Yeah. But I think you all do a wonderful thing. The show is obviously so good.
Thanks.
And we're really happy to have you here as a storyteller and a curator of those stories in one way, but also outside of that, you do a lot of story building and storytelling in the musical realm. And that's, with this project, Townland. But let's start at the beginning. How'd you get into music, Matt? What does that look like, throughout your life? How did that come about?
Well, I've had a lot of hobbies, things that started off as hobbies that turned into career moves. And music was kind of something I started later in life, and it remained a hobby and until recently always has, I think. So it's the last of my hobbies to make it into a kind of professional aspect. Mm. But I started playing guitar around 20, and it was a bit of a late bloomer. So music has never been grandfathered into me as something, as a natural talent. I have to think about it a lot. But playing guitar for me was just a means to an end of songwriting, which is what I really, really enjoyed, and actually wasn't too far off from other things I was doing in acting and drawing and things like that. So it was just really like a vessel for me, guitar playing. And then I endeavored to get better along the way to whatever level I'm at.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty good one. I mean, I've seen some of the live performance videos. You're holding it down, and you've found some other great collaborators as well that, it's all about the company you keep sometimes, as they say.
Yeah, my talent is surrounding myself with actual talent.
There you go.
That's a talent in itself. Yeah.
Truly. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to hit the old marker button here on that one, Matt. That's a great one. Just in general, we could probably stop there and just be like, hey, listen, drop the mic, walk away. I've said it, go forth and use this little gem. But okay. So you started out as a guitar player and kind of, again, like a utilitarian fashion to give yourself a bit of a framework as a songwriter.
Yeah.
What was the first kind of inspirational wave that hit you that made you want to start writing songs?
Oh, it's actually kind of embarrassing. I think because I felt insecure about my music talents, I would do a lot of quote unquote comedy music. And I wrote this song, and this would have been like mid 90s, called Stormtroopers Are People Too. And this is back before the prequels when they were labeled as clones. And so, and let me get this straight. For graduation from college, I got some money, so I bought myself a 4-track recorder, and I laid this thing down. And this really bad song, and I'm not saying that to be humble, it was really bad and really hackneyed, but it ended up on Dr. Demento's program and a couple of local radio stations. And it was solely because I was hitting on something nerdy in the zeitgeist, but not for any merit of it being a good song. It was really bad. But then that gave me a little confidence to go, okay, even if I have to use, disguises, I can do this.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, listen, I always say, and I think Tom and I have even said it maybe today in conversation, you got to write the bad songs to get to the good ones. But sometimes some of those bad ones end up doing something really powerful for the trajectory of where things can end up, right?
And I've written my share of those. I have a folder on my computer that is bigger than the songs that I like. That's just, I think I actually labeled it old and embarrassing.
Well, Matt, is that Stormtrooper song anywhere? I'm like currently in like Clone War. Like I'm rewatching all the Clone Wars, and so like honestly, that would be a treat to hear.
You know, I don't know. I did do a live show with the Thrilling Adventure Hour guys, and they had written a young adult Star Wars novel. And this is the crazy full circle of this thing: is that we did a little interview segment at Largo, this theater here in LA, and talked about the origins of the song. And then we performed it with a full professional band, and Weird Al Yankovic and all these other great artists came out, and we did this huge sing-along to it, which was just the most bit of wonderful irony, because the song really is so bad. The melody is just the same as every chord that plays, and but when you put people like that on it and professional musicians, there is a certain cloak that hides some of that. So it was a treat.
I'll tell you what, a testament to committing to the bit, right? You really, it's like you can't half-ass something like that. And I think sometimes when everybody's all in on it, something that you like, especially from the acting world and whatever, it's like the yes and kind of improv style, I guess, from what some of my improv friends would say. But I'm always find myself fascinated with that. And that's kind of like assembling that kind of cast to be like, no one's like, do we think this melody could, maybe have a little bit more zip to it or panache? Yeah. It's like, no, we're missing the point. I love that. I think that's a really funny and interesting anecdote of how these things come together. Right. And I also, as a personal aside, I think the band that I have now been in for about 20 years also started out in a very lighthearted manner by having that like first band practice, writing a song, and kind of looking to the person that would then be nominated to be our singer, and being like, well, I guess I'll write lyrics. Like, should they be like real or funny? And all of us are like, we've all done the real band thing. We're definitely voting for joke lyrics.
Yeah. I use them as a way to hide my insecurities for sure. But I would very secretly be writing serious songs. And even now, even on this album we have out now, my lyrics are kind of oblique, I think, out of sort of hiding something. I don't know, but I'm absolutely happy to talk about them, and they have very specific meaning to me. But I think a listener would go, what's he talking about there? And it's just some way for me to kind of obscure things. I think, to sort of, if you don't present yourself super seriously, you can't be seen as like treacly or over sincere or something. I don't know, but I also have graduated to doing serious stuff. So this is kind of like a mix of both, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think I articulated that well.
No. That's a phenomenal way of putting it. And I think also it goes right in line with music sometimes being that kind of cloak and obscure and backdrop. I'll share with you, I mean, this little inside joke always comes to mind from many, many years back. We were touring with the band, and we were playing shows mostly to no one at this point in our career. But there was an opening band on one of the local shows somewhere in the US that we played. And they were, I believe, like a metalcore band or whatever you would have that was very like gain to 10 singers screaming. And they were up on the stage for a line check as we were walking in. And it was just the singer, a guitar player, I guess no bass player, and just a drummer. And the sound guy at the club, I just hear him go, all right, give me something on the vocal. Let me hear the vocal just to get a level. He's like, well, I mean, do you want me to scream? He's like, well, yeah. It's like, do you scream like in, when you guys are playing? He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, then give me, like you're gonna, like it's gonna be during the set. And he's like, well, I can't scream without music. And he just looks left to his guitar player. And then as though they had rehearsed this, which I know that they had not, but him and the drummer just immediately went into the worst, like half-assed breakdown chug thing. And he just unleashed. He's like, I can't scream without music. And there was something about that moment that we still talk about to this day, but it kind of is the perfect like segue out of, I think, what you're talking about. And music tends to be that, sometimes that little extra comfort zone that we can slip into as storytellers to be a little bit more vulnerable or kind of tiptoe up to that line of vulnerability. And I guess with that, let's get right into, what brought you to writing these songs and, the forming of this project, here that obviously it's not the first time you're writing songs, but I don't think, but these songs don't come off as, are a little far removed and evolved from, the first songs that you're talking about writing back in those days. So where did the inspiration lyrically come from for some of these songs when you realized, this is a thing all of its own?
Some people describe this album we've heard as cozy doom because there's a lot of allusions to like nuclear war, earthquakes, fears of my childhood. And I should say too that I'm not 100% hiding behind these lyrics because I actually am very interested in trying something that's not a straightforward, I don't know if cliche is the right word, because I really often like songs that are very straightforward and, for lack of a better term, cliche. But for me, I feel like every time I try a lyric like that, I just go, this has been done. This has been done. It doesn't ring true. So I like to kind of find old phrases or figures of speech that kind of reflect the same thing. And so this album has songs that have been written over the past 20, 25 years, even, at least musically, even though I swapped out some of the lyrics. But I was surprised to see how a lot of the themes were the same, that I kind of keep going back to, if it's a fear of Michael Myers when I was a kid or whatever, these things are all in these songs. Like, again, though, you wouldn't necessarily know it.
Yeah. I think those turns of phrase. So it's interesting too, because I think you've been writing songs for a while now, but we talk about it, a lot of like bands, whether it might be their first record or maybe it's, not until later in their career, the idea of finding their voice, and finding, what is uniquely them and uniquely that project. And I feel like that was one of the things when I first listened through to the whole record, it kind of gripped me where it's like, it had and I immediately, and I know I hit you back and I had so many questions. I was so excited about it. I was like, who's writing this? Like, what does it look like? How are you, how are you putting it? How'd you put it all together kind of stuff? Because it felt cohesive and it felt like a project that already knew what it was, through, I think, a lot of those things. And a lot of that comes through lyrically too. Everything just kind of fit. And you don't always get that. And I think that is kind of this rare thing, especially with, first kind of full length or batching of songs, to feel that kind of cohesion there. Talk to me. So you're primarily writing the majority of these lyrics then, is that the case?
Yeah, I wrote, I think, all the lyrics. There's 2 cover songs on there and then most of the music, but Wade and Shannon's a singer and Wade's her husband, who's a multi-instrumentalist genius, did contribute some really great pieces to some of these songs that, I was stuck in a corner and he would come in and just go, try this. And it was like, wow, I never would have thought of that. And B, thank God you thought of it, because it just kind of sweeps in the right way. It's really fun to collaborate with them.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of anything on the record that was a big sticking point for you that kind of got unlocked when they came in?
Yeah. And actually, it's maybe one of the songs on the album that is very straightforward. It's called Sticks and Stones, and it was just written during quarantine, about quarantine, the early days of quarantine. And I had a bridge that I'd kind of Frankensteined out of another song that I liked, but wasn't really fitting in there. And he and Shannon just came back with a way better option that made it work. So they did the bridge on there and really connected the 2 halves together, I guess, as a bridge is supposed to do.
Well, look at that.
How did y'all end up like linking up in the first place and like creating this collective that you have now?
Yeah, it was a long road. So Townland's actually existed as a band since 2006 or something. And we've had 2 prior singers and a friend of mine who was a drummer for a long time. But it was just kind of a little folk trio or quartet. And we would do a little EP here and there. And then it lay dormant for so many years. And then I was at the Earwolf Podcast Network Christmas party. And up goes Shannon to do a version of Florence and the Machine's Dog Days. And I just went, whoa. And this had come at a time when Jeff, who was our former drummer, and Daniel, our bassist, we got a check from CD Baby for past CDs sold over the last 10 years. And it just finally met that threshold where they have to pay you. So we got a $50 check for the last 10 years.
Hey!
And so we went to get a drink and thought, let's get together and play again. And that's when I saw Shannon do this thing. And we said, will you come, try a couple songs with us? And we tried a couple other people, but she was such a natural fit. And then it wasn't long before her husband was in. And then we became an actual full band, which we had never been before, with actual big drum set and a bigger sound. And we were going to do just kind of a stripped down EP. And it was also quarantine. So we had time and we would just send Logic files back and forth, especially Wade and I, and just kind of produced it as we went. And it was really, really fun.
I love that. I mean, her voice is, she's got an incredible voice.
Yeah.
Not telling you something that you don't know, but that's also striking in that there's an honesty, and sometimes there are that's conventionally accurate melodic singing and a re-representation of that melody. And then there is something where it feels like it just fits. And I think that's sometimes what we're talking about is with some of those intangibles, kind of like the lyric, right? You say, okay, well, I'm saying what I mean, but why doesn't that, this pop song just does it? And I believe it, but when I try and say it, it doesn't work. And then you stumble onto the right restructuring. And then you just, sometimes, you're just like, it just, what I kind of say, and I always think about it as when it just sinks into the music and you stop thinking about whether or not it works and you just realize, oh, now I'm listening to the song.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of juxtaposing the meaning of the lyrics with the tone of the song, and not as a trick, but just kind of, I just like the irony of a happy song with sad lyrics or vice versa or something, I don't know what it is. They're not all that way, but there's a few,
Juxtaposition is one of the keys to at least attention grabbing. It's clear why you're drawn to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Subverting expectations. It's pattern interruption, which I think, especially nowadays, there's a lot of patterns that just get reinforced, especially in songwriting and with music, I mean, how many, it's been interesting. Tom and I this has been our foray into the podcast world as of the last, couple years, slowly. But him and I always find it very interesting to draw parallels in learning our way. It's kind of like we're starting a new band in a new genre.
Yes.
And I mean, ironically enough, that's brought us to kind of really embracing the idea of each season of this show is a record of its own and has a track listing and in its own kind of meta format. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about taking a look at what your process is like as a songwriter, and at what point it gets kind of taken in and kind of put through the filter of, whether it's your band and co-writers or, your own filter of what passes go and, what will not collect $200 or $50, from a royalty check, So, I mean, I'd love to unpack a little bit more of that because, and this is what Tom and I were talking about this so much that, producing podcasts, being in that space from, storytellers, you're around them all the time, you've been doing that and telling stories of your own, but this is, a different way to do that. And there's a lot of ways to approach that, right? And I mean, that's what songwriting in its own way is at the core. But how do you start to make those decisions? And were there any interesting, stories that you chose to tell in a different way, or maybe under the guise of something, maybe the cadence of them? I mean, we'll get into, talking about juxtaposition, but I think even from a section to section standpoint of a song's arrangement and structure, that's like a tool that you can use to kind of, catch people's attention and keep people's attention with a story that, in order to get them right where you want them, so to speak. What are your thoughts on that? And how did you approach that with these songs?
I always start with the music when it comes to me, and if it keeps flowing, to me, it's worth working on. And if I just get stuck, then it obviously feels like it's not going to go somewhere. And so whenever I have, a melody of some kind, that I just don't, without thinking, go like, what does this feel like? And then what's some words that can just build one line, and then I'll usually go from there and build it off. Almost always the first verse is what I start with, and then it feels natural to escalate with a chorus. I rarely start with a chorus or a lyric. And then structure-wise, I have noticed something on this album. We've talked about it, and I always have to apologize to Shannon for it, but I almost never repeat a chorus lyrically, even if it's just a change of a but or an and to juxtapose the meaning the second time around. Like, it was once bad, but now it's good. But usually I'm doing fully different choruses. And so Shannon not only has to memorize these, but the subtle changes can be very confusing for anyone singing those things. But I'm always of the mind of, you've got this real estate. Why would you just say the same thing over? Why not say the same thing, but with a twist this time, and then a third twist, or then go back. But by the time you've gotten to the song, the same lyrics from the beginning have a different tone to them or something. I love having any real estate to say something, and it seems like a wasted opportunity to repeat, though I do that as well, but still.
Of course. I love that. I've always been a huge fan of songs that have that little color change, or, what I sometimes kind of jokingly refer to as the Shyamalan twist of a third chorus, where you're like, I had this pegged as one way the whole time, and man, they totally caught me off guard. I didn't know that was coming, but it was seemingly right there the whole time. But I do agree with you. It's like, this is what I was interested at and wanted to see is, the relationship of time as a songwriter and music in general, is you're kind of pulling people into your own sense of how time is passing for that couple minutes, however long it is. And you kind of dictate that, both as a player, as a band, when you're organically playing as one, you're kind of doing that. And you're, unless you're, even if your drummer is playing to a click or whatever it might be, you're still, kind of organically pushing and pulling and giving subtle undertones of, no, this is how we're living on this side of the beat right now, or we're living on this, side of it. And it's interesting too, because I think you can kind of do that in a more cerebral way lyrically, and keep people tuned in by hearing those subtle changes, because that is the pattern interruption. So that's kind of actually a great example, Matt, when you talk about, doing that, even though it might be tough and a singer might need a couple more runs with a lyric sheet in front of them in the studio, to get it right before they're hammered in. That's kind of exactly what they're doing. Because then, a chorus, sure, there's always that earworm value to it, but you do have that real estate where you can kind of keep people just a little on their toes.
If there's enough remnant of the chorus before to at least recognize right when you get into it that this is the chorus again. We have a song called Solid State where the verses actually start, there's a reference to 1988, then 78, then 68. And so sometimes I can get too in the weeds with this thing. And I was suggesting to the band, hey, what if we produced each one of those verses like it would sound in that decade? So, 88 would have been a little bit more, Casio beat, where the 78 would have that dry, flat drum rock, and 68 would maybe have those sweet pre-disco Bee Gees strings or something. But I think it was starting to get too gimmicky. But my head's always trying to tie thematic elements into the music and comment on the music sometimes, even if it's not overt. And I just feel like, again, if you have the lyrics and you have the music, if you can marry them in a way, even thematically, that's not just melodic, it's such a fun thing to do. And I almost sometimes feel like I'm making a puzzle for people to solve with these songs. And I don't mean that in a highfalutin way, but for me, I've dissected every little word, and there's like hidden meanings all throughout. And it's almost kind of, and I say this in a pejorative sense, like a poor fellow with a beautiful mind writing markers on a window that needs a little help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't mean I have a beautiful mind. I mean,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's therapy, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
As music fans, we know that the records we love are more than just something we listen to, right? Over time, they become a part of us and a part of our identity, and nobody knows this better than the people at Rockabilia, the best online shop for band merch, hands down. For more than 30 years, Rockabilia has offered the largest selection of officially licensed music merchandise available around the world. They do it all, from authentic concert t-shirts to band hoodies and posters, and even accessories from your favorite iconic artists. They do hats, backpacks, bags, pins, belts, you name it. They have it, as well as exclusive access to limited edition designs that you can only get through them and the artists that they partner with. Maybe you missed the merch table at a recent show and you're looking to treat yourself. Maybe you're looking to treat somebody else in your life with a gift card. Or maybe you're looking to outfit the children in your life with some new gear, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Yes, they even have accessories for your pets. They have it all, so just head over to rockabilia.com or follow the link in our show notes, and for a limited time, all Record Process listeners can receive 10% off their order just by entering the code ROCKRECORD. That's all one word, ROCKRECORD, at checkout. So a lot of people think that Oxford Pennant makes, well, pennants. You know, the triangular wool flag type things that usually have like a sports team's logo or the name of a place printed on them. Well, to be honest, that is what I thought too before my band The Wonder Years had the chance to work with them. Through that process, we realized just how much care they put into their beautifully crafted, iconic keepsakes that remind us who we are and why we do what we do. They've teamed up with some massive artists in the process, bands like My Chemical Romance, Wilco, and 21 Pilots, just to name a few. And they even offer custom shop orders for artists, companies, and unique events or special occasions. So please do yourself a favor and head over to oxfordpennant.com and use the code RECORD15 to receive 15% off your first retail purchase from their web store.
When you got into recording this record, you gave one example of like the different verses, but like were there any examples of how you played with those elements during the recording process of this record?
Which elements?
Of playing with time, juxtaposition, and like the influence of how much you put in, like thought-wise and puzzle piece wise, into the actual like the physically making of the record. I
can think of one. We have a song called War, and there's a reference to DEFCON 4. You know, some people have pointed out that DEFCON 4 is actually not really a heightened state of nuclear readiness, but that's what the intention of the lyric is in the song. But I think I'm being clever, because then the 3 guys in the band have a background vocal in each subsequent verse that counts it down: DEFCON 3, DEFCON 2, DEFCON 1. But that's often lost on people because like I said, I sit with these things for a while and I get so into the weeds that I think sometimes I'm doing myself a disservice, you know.
But you're world building, and that's super huge, and like the amount of lore and thought and detail go into those like Easter eggs, I don't think gets lost on people. But as it progresses and matures throughout time, I think that will be greatly, like, that aspect of the songs will be even more appreciated.
The real credit goes to Shannon, though, because she's the one that takes these things and makes them sound like they make sense when they often don't. And I think I've even said to her at times, hey, if you want, I'm happy to tell you what these mean so you at least understand what you're singing, but I also don't need to if you feel like you want to just do your own thing with them, because I've never once heard her sing this stuff where it feels like she doesn't have authority or doesn't know what she's talking about. And although I think there's plenty of instances that we've never talked about, and it even led me to take these songs and do like a red line annotation and write it down so I remember, because literally every line has some kind of thing in it, and again it starts to look like the window in a beautiful mind, and I have to step back and go, what are you doing? You're a sad person. But like if Shannon ever needs those, it's like the annotated versions to make sense of it.
It's good to, not that I'll need it, but it's good to know it's there.
Yeah. Or for my daughter to see how crazy her father is.
Or for when the mind starts going and you're like, where did this come from? Well, so, that's actually a really interesting point that you say that, because your vocalist, who is, as you said, kind of charged with owning these lyrics and selling them, as though they were her own, in effect, it's the band. It's like, that's also not an easy thing to do.
No.
But also I think it's interesting, and I'm curious to see where you stand on this then, Matt, or if you have any thoughts on the idea that sometimes, some people take fans and music listeners, right, in general. Some people need to know every little annotated nuance of exactly what the singer or the songwriter or the vocalist meant with each word. And they chose this word instead of this word because of this subcontext, which relates to this thing, and can argue and debate it, until people are blue in the face and they want to know all of that inside baseball. Then there are other people or other artists that say, I'd rather not tell people what this song is really about fully. I'd rather that it mean whatever they need it to mean for them, that gives it meaning, and they can ascribe their own, meaning and specifics to it, and kind of imprint wrap that song around themselves and have it kind of frame their own experience. What is your thought on that? Because you kind of have a singer that seems to be doing a great job of that intuitively already. And that's an interesting inner dynamic.
I'm of both minds completely, in the sense that I would never be under any illusion that people want that from the songs. But if they do, I'm more than happy to talk about it, because I think I'm that way. When I listen to a Wilco song, it's so enigmatic, but at the same time so poetic. None of it's by accident, obviously. Jeff Tweedy's a brilliant songwriter, and they're just allusions to things that I would love to know what they mean. But I also love to put my own meaning on them, which I certainly do. And then even that meaning changes over time. So I'm so happy to talk about the minutia, but I would never expect anybody to want that. So it'd be like they'd have to seek it out, because I would never force it on anyone,
Right. Well, and this is maybe an interesting transition in this talk about how things exist and maybe evolve, and meaning evolves across time and space. And it brings me to a really interesting idea of how you chose to take the meanings and the stories of some of these songs and then bring them into the digital world and the visual realm for people. And I'd love you to kind of extrapolate on that for our listeners. And we'll obviously link to some of these that I'm alluding to in the show notes here, because people must see them, because they turned out great. But many people are probably familiar at this point with bands putting out lyric videos, and for that exact reason, you took a very authentic and a very unique approach to that with some of the songs on this record.
Yeah, we're getting back to the writing on the window, I think is I'll say it.
That's right. Yeah. And but I love it. It's like, maybe it's where we're thriving right now. And it's just such a great part of this project, and the songs on this record have made them come alive in a really cool way. Please explain how that came about.
Well, it's funny you mentioned lyric videos because that's how this whole thing started. I started looking around for just little apps and filters that would do that, and they all just kind of seemed pretty run of the mill. And I love a creative challenge, and then I started out by just doing these little. I just thought, oh, I'll work something up in Photoshop. I made it out of an old lie detector and cannibalized little bits and pieces, and then started drawing the imagery of each song on EKG paper that would flow through like a lie detector. But I kind of found these markers, and I took an X-Acto knife and cut the nibs into a square so I could use it as like a pixel marker. So I could do this as if it was printed on a 70s analog thing. And actually these song-alongs are probably the closest thing, if you want to seek it out, to the actual meanings of all the songs for the most part. Some of them are interpretive, but and then I just thought, of course, me trying to do something quick and easy the way I do it meant it was so belabored and so intensive. And then I realized, wait, there's 12 songs on this album. I've got to do 12 of them. And we had just had a baby, but in a way the timing worked out because when my baby would go to sleep and my wife would go to sleep, I would kind of take some time and work on these at night. And I just worked, like, hooked up a literal conveyor belt on a coffee table in my office where I would buy these rolls of EKG paper and I would sketch out. And I had to do the math of every, so many seconds was a certain length of this paper, and you had to turn it at a certain speed, and I would shoot it all. And then I would bring that into the computer and put it underneath the image of the lie detector so it looked like it was within the machine. And sometimes there'd be holes in the paper with green screen that then I'd put like fire below it, like the machine was burning. And each time I got way too carried away and it took forever, but I'm nothing if not a completist, and probably to a fault. And so I got it done.
And they turned out spectacular and just so interesting. I was just watching, actually, interestingly enough, the one for Eyesore, and which that song has an interesting story that I've heard you explain on Conan's show, and I love, maybe you can give the Cliff Note version of it here. I won't force you to tread through it all again. Everyone should go, but it made, after seeing that, because I think I saw them in the inverse order. I saw the song along video first, and I was like, oh, this is a very interesting, I wasn't really thinking, this is very on the nose. And then I heard the story behind the song. What's the song Eyesore about? Let's start there.
It's based on a true story about my great-great-grandfather who, when he was a child, had his eye pecked out by a rooster. And I just don't know a ton more than that, but that was enough to kind of launch me into a song and think about. I knew that he, lived in a certain place and had a certain type of life. So I kind of filled in the details myself. And yeah, that came up not planned on the Conan podcast. And I, as I often do, I took a lot of heat for it from him in a fun way. But then I was like, oh, wait a minute. But the backdoor thing is publicity for that song that just happened. And then it, like, that song, for in a relative sense to our songs, really took off. So I'm very grateful, and I don't mind the scars.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Oh, you want to play this game, huh, Conan? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll bite. Fine. Have at it, will you? I know that we're still rolling, so no, that's awesome. I mean, but it was a really very funny and kind of serendipitous moment, as you alluded to, because you had been working on this project anyway. Yeah, I love how that kind of, taking it back to, the songwriting and the inspiration, that was this kind of like, maybe not the whole story, but it gave you, you had an entry point into a world and into a narrative that you could kind of build the rest out of,
Yeah, I would say half of it's invention. And we have a song on the album called Bob too, about this Universal Studios stuntman that I just adored when I was a kid. And I think I invented a whole life from him that I imagine is polar opposite to what really was. He's passed now, but I mean, it's just, I don't understand my influences sometimes, or my sources, or, inspirations, or.
So would it be safe to say that maybe you were like people play the stranger on a train game, pick someone, make up a whole backstory for them, that you were pretty top notch at that, or really, really enjoyed that one?
Yeah. I think you can't even fail, because if you are setting out to do something that's understandably mostly fictional, you're the god in that world and you get to say what's what. And I think, again, at first I had this music and I'm like, shouldn't I be writing a song about the love I feel for my family, which I have and often do. But no, the thing I kept thinking about was how this guy inspired me to do comedy. And I found some recent YouTube videos of his, and it was really, in a strange way, affecting me to the point of almost embarrassment of why am I resonating with this strange like moment in time in this strange little show at a theme park. And then I thought, well, that's just so stupid. I kind of have to do it now. I think I like doing songs that are just about things you would never. No one wants to listen to a song about a Universal Studio stuntman if you put that down on a piece of paper. But I don't think you'd know that listening to the song, if that makes sense,
Right. That's not getting greenlit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the idea of a story, regardless of the topic, is that it connects with people. And clearly, like, the connection of the stuntman has transcended out of your relationship with that person and transcended onto paper, and now can be interpreted as 1,000 different relationships with 1,000 different people. A very powerful tool, even though it's so highly specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's crazy, I've since found out because of I often joke and speak about this guy because I just adored him, that he lived in the same city where I grew up in Whittier, and his stepdaughter and I went to high school together. It's crazy. And I never knew the guy.
Wow.
He doesn't know I exist,
Has she filled you in on any of the like backstory?
No, that's the other thing, is I keep like brushing up against these people and kind of, write them and say, I'd love to know more. And then every time I get close to learning more about this guy, it's a dead end. And I really know nothing about his actual character as a man. I only know specific details about what he did and some movies he was in and things,
Wow.
Oh, wow. It's almost like, it's kind of like the mystique of like the old school rock and roll mystique. Like, do you actually want to know the truth now?
I know that. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. And probably it's best left alone. So in my imagination, he's one of my best friends.
Imaginary Bob, we love you.
We do love you. Well, and that's maybe a great place to kind of wrap the whole idea of it, in the sense of you can take, I think it kind of boils down in this regard. Like sometimes they say like the riches are in the niches, if you will. Like sometimes something so seemingly weird and odd and specific, it's actually less about, the thing itself. And it's more about the idea as a songwriter chooses you, and it's the thing that you just can't shake, that it just kind of attaches itself to you. And you're like, all right, fine. I will not be rid of you until I, go explore this.
Yeah, that's an easy yes, 100%.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, where it doesn't translate on paper, right, Matt? Because if here's this scenario or this person or this figure or this story, that it's not compelling. And it's really like the job as a songwriter and as musicians, when we're trying to put a record, an album together, is to find the ways that actually put forward that kind of like intangible resonance about that idea,
Yeah, and this song too is in an alternate tuning and has a changing time signature. So we're really asking a lot of the listener to come along on this journey about a former Universal Studios stuntman in a kind of folk prog rock ballad of the lost song of Bob Rochelle. You are free to not come along on this journey, but if you'd like to, it's there and waiting for you.
It is certainly not a mainstream ideology. Yeah, there.
No, they're not going to be covering this on American Idol.
If there's maybe Eurovision, maybe somebody will pick it up.
Yeah. Oh, it actually would work on. It's strange enough.
Yeah, it would work very well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like Matt, just to speak one more time on like the highly specific aspect. Like one of personally like my my favorite songs is this highly specific song by the Mountain Goats, and it's the best death metal band out of Denton, and like tells a crazy, very intense story, very intense, like highly specific story about people that you don't know, but it just resonates.
Oh yeah. Speaking of Denton, Texas, one of my favorite bands is Midlake, and they have a song called Roscoe. And there's lines like, what if my name had been changed into something like Roscoe, blah, 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 waiting with my Aunt Roseline. It's so specific. I have no idea what it's about, but it just doesn't matter. If it gets you, it gets you.
Amazing.
Yeah, right. Are you a Mountain Goats fan, Matt?
Yeah, I'm not an expert by any means, but I've always enjoyed when they come on.
Yeah, it's so very good. My singer with Wonder Years, actually, even though from a genre standpoint, very worlds apart in a lot of ways, has always been taking a lot of that kind of very imagery-laden storytelling, descriptive stuff. And I think that's a great example of doing just that. But alongside that is the likes of this Townland record, Matt. You did a wonderful job. You made something that I think has a lot of Easter eggs and all of the markers of something that I'm sure you all should be and hopefully will be very proud of many, many years to come. And I'm sure it's something that people will continue getting a lot out of as the years go on. We're excited to see what comes next. Any teasers that you'd like to give us?
Well, yeah, we just, I think, started working on our first new song for a new album, and we just had a little mini rehearsal last night. And then, speaking about lyrics fitting in to the music and everything, we have this break in the song where Shannon has the lyric, once in a while we move with some style. It's a counterpoise to the background noise, and then the three boys echo to the background noise. And I had to say to them, you need to physically restrain me because I'm now going to push for the second verse to go. And the counterpoise to the background noise, we're the background boys. Rest assured it won't be in there, but I wanted it out there somewhere publicly to know that God, if that ever occurs to you, it was considered at least somewhat.
Well, good news, Matt. At 48 minutes and 22 seconds, that has officially been marked and not forgotten. We will salvage that. So when that song ever makes its appearance and public debut, we will have this clip ready for you, and we will lovingly pass it your way. So that's awesome. We look forward to seeing what you come up with. I'm sure it'll be great. And where can everybody find out more about the band, about what you do, all of those good things that we should link to in the show notes here?
I'm Matt Gourley, Gourley on Instagram, and Townland Band on Instagram. We also have a Bandcamp page as well as our Spotify profile. However, we have vinyl out of Honey on the Hi-Fi, although we've fortunately sold out every release we've put out of it. We have one more coming in the near future, so you can find us on Instagram, and we always put up there when it's about to drop, and we'll get it out to you.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, that's awesome. I gotta get me one. I gotta get one. Yes, of course. Our pleasure, Matt. We will talk to you soon. Be well, my friend.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Casey.
This was so great sitting down with Matt and talking about his exploration of storytelling in different and unique ways. He has a really mindful and thought-provoking way of hiding little Easter eggs and nuances throughout his songs. He expressed his love for utilizing the expectations that typical song structures create in order to captivate listeners lyrically, keeping them engaged as the songs evolve in unexpected ways. Using things like tension, release, and suspense are all really crucial tools in a songwriter's arsenal. And there's a million ways to tell the same story, but the one people often remember the most is the one that finds a way to surprise them. And Matt seeks to do this by changing the intent of lyrics or even flipping the meaning of a word or phrase on its head. He also mentions juxtaposing the meaning of the lyrics with a completely different tone musically that creates an ironic change in how the audience processes and ultimately responds to the song. In effect, almost creating a third, more complex emotional depth than just happy or sad. So give that some thought this week. What expectations are you setting in motion with the music you're writing? How can you turn those expectations into building blocks that allow for the formation of memorable departures from the norm? So if you're still with us, I hope that interview delivered much more than expected. But the one thing you can count on is that there is still much more ahead right here on Season 5 of
The Record Process.